Now, I have met individuals where you can literally just say the word cellulite and they will knee-jerk reaction smack you in the face. That's how much animosity they have against this cellulite issue. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand the most common underlying causes for this problem. And the weird thing is that the causes are going to make sense. I love it when that happens. And beyond helping you understand the actual causes of this problem, I'm also going to give you some steps that you can take to correct it. I know, you don't want to miss this.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So cellulite is an issue that seems to show up most commonly on the hips, thighs, and buttocks. And it also seems to show up more commonly for women than it does men. And I'm going to help you understand why in just a minute. But to understand cellulite, we really need to look at the structure of the skin. So what we're looking at here is that this is what the fascia is, and this is underneath in the structure of the skin. And then up here we see the epidermis, and then this layer here is like the dermis. And then what we're looking at here is this connective tissue. And this connective tissue is what kind of holds everything in place. It's basically the structure of this whole skin organism that is holding it in place. So this is an important factor of what's going on. And what happens is when these fat cells start to fill up with stuff, they start to expand. And so here when we see them expand, they push up on this skin, and then it creates like this dimple. So that's the thing with cellulite, is it has all these dimples that people feel, oh, I really don't like the look of that. I really wish I didn't have all these cellulite dimple things. And this would just be one dimple. And that dimple is being caused by this connective tissue holding that structure in place, and yet these expanded fat cells are pushing up on the skin and creating that dimple. So there has to be a couple of things in play here for this to become problematic. And one of those things is the fat cell storage. Something has to be being stored in that fat cell to make it expand. We need to look at the connective tissue strength, because here we see this connective tissue that's kind of holding everything down, and the skin is nice and flat. It's like this big wide tree branches holding everything down. But if this isn't strong, when it gets pushed up, then it can kind of all come together into this one little dimple thing. So this connective tissue strength matters, but also the epidermis strength matters. So the strength of that skin, but also the thickness of that skin is a really big deal. So when it's thick, it stays smooth, and that skin is strong, then it holds strong and it stays smooth. But when it's thin or it's weak, it's easier to create that dimple. So that's one of the problems why this shows up more commonly with women, is because men seem to have thicker skin and women seem to have thinner skin. Now, thinner skin, that doesn't mean like you're going to get upset when somebody puts a tweet up on Twitter that you didn't like. Thin skin means actual skin that is thin. And nobody really understands why this is happening, but I kind of theorize that men are sort of basic. They're just basic. And that's not to say that women are complicated. I don't want to light up the comments section in that kind of way. It just means that women have a lot more important organs and stuff going on than men do. Men are just basic. Women have all these reproductive things that have to happen, and to build another human is a really complicated process. And so women are just, they're more fancy. They have more stuff where resources need to go towards that stuff, and men are just like skin and a remote control. That's pretty much all we are. So our resources can go towards thickening up this skin, where maybe for women, resources need to be prioritized in other areas. So it's a little bit of a ripoff, but this can be why we see more cellulite with women than we do with men. So if these three things are the big concerns, then we need to understand why are these more problematic for some people and not for others. So let's dig into that just a little bit. And the first thing that we want to understand when we want to try to correct this cellulite issue is that we need to decrease the need for things to be stored in these fat cells. We don't want them to be expanded. We want them to be just chill, just hanging out. When they expand, then we're creating this trouble. So the thing is that fat cells don't just expand to hold extra body fat. That can be one problem. So if you're gaining weight, those fat cells are going to expand as they hold more fat in those fat cells. But other things can also be stored in fat cells, like toxins. And not all toxins can be stored in fat cells, but some can. And we'll come back to this in a second. And surprisingly, so can calcium. Calcium can also be stored in these fat cells because when there's a lot of calcium, it's called hypercalcemia, in the body, in the bloodstream, it can create a lot of trouble. Like, hey, like your brain and your things and your heart and all this stuff doesn't work right. So it can be very problematic, and I'll put some links to some studies and information in the description below about that. But what's important to understand is that when the calcium is too high in the bloodstream, the body will do what it can to move some of it out. So you might pee out a lot of this calcium, and then somebody might deal with things like kidney stones from peeing out too much calcium. But some people will store some of this in fat cells. And there's even some studies I'll link below showing that when there's more calcium in the fat cells, the cells can become more efficient at burning fat. So that doesn't mean I want you to try to shove calcium into your fat cells to burn more fat, because it does explain why we see this cellulite issue even when somebody is not overweight. So it could be an issue of things like calcium being stored in this fat cell, or maybe some toxins stored in these fat cells where they'll have the cellulite issue even when they're not overweight. So things that can create this is eating too many carbohydrates or sugars. When you eat carbohydrates or sugars, calcium likes to follow sugar, just like you would like to follow the ice cream truck when you were 9. Calcium follows sugar. So if we eat too much of these carbohydrates or sugars, calcium will leave the tissues and all these places where it's supposed to be. It'll follow this sugar, and when the sugar gets burned up, the calcium will just get dropped, and the body will either deposit it in some places, it'll kind of pee it out, or it can even deposit it in these fat cells. So one thing that you can do is you can look at your urine pH at least 2 hours after a meal, and if that urine pH is like 6.2, 6.3 or higher, that's a strong sign that you're peeing out a lot of calcium, and that calcium is alkaline and it's raising the alkalinity of your urine pH. So that can be a possible sign. It's not a diagnostic thing or anything, but it's just a sign that if your urine pH is high, you might want to take some steps that might reduce your carbohydrate or sugar intake. You may also be taking too much vitamin D. Excess vitamin D can also pull calcium out of the tissues and places like that and hold it in the bloodstream and create trouble that way. If that's a big, like, what are you talking about? Everybody says to drink gallons of vitamin D at a time. I'll put a link in the description below for our video on who should stop taking vitamin D, because the reality is that even though a lack of vitamin D can create a lot of trouble, significant trouble, too much vitamin D can be just as problematic. So I'll put that video down there so you can check that out to see if that might be a problem that's causing some calcium displacement for you. Now, when we're looking at why isn't this skin strong enough, why aren't these connective tissues strong enough to hold everything flat, we need to start looking at the body's ability to access nutrients. Access nutrients like building blocks, like amino acids and vitamins and minerals, all those things that the body needs to rebuild and strengthen these structures. So when we're looking at nutrient access, we want to know, are there any digestive malfunctions? Is a person making enough stomach acid? Is their bile flowing correctly? Because it's very common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid, and then they can't really acidify their food. If they can't acidify their food, they can't really break it down properly. It's also really common for bile in the gallbladder to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. That bile is supposed to come down after the food is acidified. It meets that acidic product, and then the alkaline bile meeting this acid product creates this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart, break apart all of those elemental nutrients and get those out of our food so the body can use them for these building blocks. So these are very big deals. So we want to know, is a person dealing with any type of digestive symptoms at all? And if they are, then digestion is probably not working the way that it's supposed to work. So my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, can kind of walk you through, are there aspects of digestion that aren't working correctly for you? And if there are, what steps can you take to improve those? And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in this description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free and you can just walk through that process, because this is a big deal for your body to access those nutrients. And that brings us to, well, you got to eat some nutrient-rich foods, like some real food. You're not going to get the structures to fix all this stuff from a toaster pastry. You got to eat something that has nutrients in it. So this is kind of a big deal where you have to eat things that have nutrients, but then you also have to be able to break them down properly to get the nutrients out of it. So that's really, really big. A next step can be to increase collagen intake. That's really a big part. You know, you hear a lot about, oh, I need collagen so my skin can be pretty. I want to be pretty and smooth and soft. And, you know, these are all building blocks that the body uses for these structures. And the problem is that we don't eat the way that we did 60, 70, 80 years ago when grandma would take a carcass of whatever we ate and cook it in a soup for 3 days and pull all of those nutrients out of the bones and make them very easy for the body to access. We just don't eat that way. We eat out of a wrapper that comes in a vending machine. So if you can do things like make bone broth, maybe you supplement with some collagen. There's a lot of grass-fed collagens on the market now that are a little bit better than what we had 10, 15 years ago. So there are options to make this a little bit easier, but this can be a really helpful part of all of this process, giving your body easy access to these nutrients that you don't even have to break down if your digestion isn't working correctly. Bone broth, it's kind of already broken down in a liquid form, it just goes right in. It's also important to give the body these rebuilding tools like amino acids and vitamin C. So when the body is breaking down protein correctly, it can access amino acids and use those as those building blocks. But if a person isn't making enough stomach acid and they're burping or bloating or having acid reflux or maybe even constipation, then those are signs of a person not acidifying their stomach correctly so that they can break down their food. And vitamin C is one of the building blocks of pretty much every repair and rebuilding process that the body does. And the problem is that humans and primates and guinea pigs are pretty much the only mammals that don't make their own vitamin C. So we really need to get it from the food that we're eating, and it's just not in our food like it used to be. So most people need to supplement with some form of whole food vitamin C, not like ascorbic acid or something like that that you would get at a drugstore. Most of those are just fractionated portions of that whole C molecule that the body needs to really rebuild and repair things. We'll put a video down below in the description for vitamin C mistakes so that you can understand the right way to use vitamin C. But that can be an important part of getting this to rebuild in a way that this can stay smooth and nice. We like it nice. Okay, next we need to look at calcium displacement. So we talked about looking at our urine pH, and then we might need to lower our carbs and sugars, and we need to look at our vitamin D intake because we don't want to be storing all of these calcium things that's floating around in the body. And that brings us back to these toxins that we talked about. When digestion isn't working correctly, well, the liver likes to take a lot of our junk and filter it out and then put it into this bile so that when the bile gets dropped down, it can carry that filth out the back door when we poop like a champion. But if bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly, then the toxins aren't really being taken out. So they get reassimilated into the system. The liver's got to filter them out all over again. It's like, hey, I already did this. Why are you giving it to me again? And then the liver gets overwhelmed, and then a lot of these toxins, the body's going to be like, well, what else can I do with them? Oh, I'm going to shove them in these fat cells. Sorry about your cellulite. So the body can take some of these toxins, shove them in a fat cell for safekeeping in hopes that they remove it later, but the coast is never clear because the detox pathway is not working correctly. So it's really important that we make sure our bile is flowing correctly. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can see if that might be a problem for you. So when you understand these things, you start to make sense of, oh, that's why that cream did nothing. That cream was $49.95 and it did nothing. And how can you have a remedy that's going to fix cellulite when the cause can be different for each person? So you really have to look at your physiology and understand what's going on and correct the problems that will allow these things to happen so that you can get this smooth skin and fix the dimple actions. And since the digestive and the detox pathways are probably the biggest part of this whole situation here, go ahead and jump over right now and check out our video on 20 signs you're not digesting your food correctly. Let us know how it goes.